Well, hey, small groups, and welcome back to week 4 of our walk through the book of Colossians. Anna, how is reading Colossians going for you?
Oh, Jason, it has been an absolute treat to walk through all 4 chapters. And today we are finishing off strong, so we hope that you've enjoyed it. And we're excited for this last part of the letter of Colossians. So, Jace, kick us off. We start in chapter 4. What is happening?
Wow, what is happening? As it says in the title, an encouragement for prayer from our friend Paul. I love how it starts. It says, devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. Right from the start, we're getting a real lesson in how to do our Christian walk from Paul here. But I think it's one of those little zingers there that we read, that devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. And so for us to even ask ourselves right from the start in chapter 4, how are we actually coming before God in prayer? So asking ourselves, what is our posture of prayer? So we read that, and then we continue reading on. I love verse 5 and 6. It says, live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. There is some serious gold in that, Anna. Unpack it. What do you got for us?
So, as Jason read, those verses, verse 5 and 6, are so instructional for us, and it's such a good reminder. I love especially where it's talking about wisdom and how we act towards outsiders. I think that all of us find ourselves in situations, if it's in our family or at work or at school or wherever, where we're mixing with people who might not be in the family of faith yet. And so what Paul is doing here is he's saying, make sure that you're wise in how you act. And then also making the most of every opportunity. I don't know if you're like me at all, but I think that there's been a lot of opportunities that I've probably wasted, where I'm having conversations with people, or there's opportunity for me to either share my faith or just kind of act as though we've been taught in the last couple of chapters in Colossians. But it's saying make the most of absolutely every opportunity. And how do we do that? We do that by letting our conversations always being filled with grace. In my translation, it says seasoned with salt, which is often that reference to when Jesus says, I am the salt, to be the salt and life. What is it?
Salt and light? Salt and light,
that's it. Be the salt and light in this world. So it's saying seasoned with salt so that you may know how to answer everyone. I just love that kind of first off the bat in chapter 4. It's just saying make sure that you're making the most of every opportunity and having it filled with grace and salt.
Even asking yourself the question, I guess, like, what kind of conversations are you having in your workplace or at home or amongst your friends? You know, like, it's very clear there. Let your conversations be gracious and attractive. Often, I feel like we as Christians can just fall into that pattern of almost gossip or negative behavior or just not healthy life giving. It comes off the back of John's sermon the other week around cynicism versus joy. And then to read that again where it says, let your conversations be gracious and attractive. Are the conversations that we as Christians are having, are they actually appealing to our friends from the outside? And if they're not, we actually may need to do a bit of soul searching. We may need to go back to verse 2 where it says, devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart, and really just center ourselves around that, and then let our conversations be attractive and appealing. I think it's a really, really convicting verse for us to ask ourselves a question: what are our conversations like?
And it's the kind of thing that if you remind yourself even each day of this week after small group, just to be like, okay, I want to be wise in how I act in all my conversations, and I want to have it filled with grace. And this section actually is kind of the final section of all of these instructions that Paul has been giving. And so especially in chapters 3 and that beginning of chapter 4, he's giving us this behavioral instruction, what to remind ourselves to act like. And so we've learnt so much in how to reflect Christ, how to continue to behave in a way that is honoring unto him. In chapter 3, just to remind you, he said to take off all of the old self, so all of the lying and the disgraceful talk and all of the things that don't belong in the attitude and the character and the behavior of a believer. But But again, just to remind us, because I think that it's so easy to fall into the trap that those instructions, those encouragements aren't just for us to individually help better ourselves or for like self-improvement, but they're always to reflect Christ and always for the community of believers. So I just want to remind us that that is why we're acting in this way, and not just to like be better Christians or better people, but to actually bring ourselves closer to Christ, therefore to imitate him.
And then, Anna, as we read on from 7 onwards, we kind of read, it almost seems like to some degree Paul's just name dropping a bunch of people and just sort of saying, hey, who's this, who's that? Can you help us understand why? Is it just Paul name dropping and just filling in words to hit his quota for Colossians, or is there something a little bit more to it than that?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like sometimes when we read a letter, it's really easy to like skim over the front part of it because you're like, yeah, I don't really know who these people are, it doesn't matter. And similarly, this last section of chapter 4, it's easy to just kind of flip the page and just think, oh, that doesn't have anything left in it for me. But I always think like this is still in the Bible. It's still there for a reason. Yeah, it's been through a lot of processes to be refined. So if they've left it there, it's definitely for a reason. Yeah. So it's good for us not to just like skim over that, but to actually see, what is Paul doing here? He's incredibly intentional in the way that he writes a letter. So what is he trying to do for the Colossians and for us in these last couple of verses? And I kind of just went through, Jace, and circled all of the people that he was name dropping.
Yeah.
And there's actually 11 people that he mentions from verse 7 until verse 18. And all of those people, it's kind of like, they don't really make sense to us, but they definitely made sense to these people in Colossae. And so what Paul is doing here is he's reminding this small community of Colossians that, in fact, they are a part of a massive faith community. Yeah, it's not just them. And also remember, Paul has never even met this crew before. Yeah. And so he's trying to draw some relational ties to say, hey, we actually have this friend in common. Kind of like on Facebook, shared friends.
Yes.
So he's saying here, like, hey, we're part of a faith community that's bigger than you guys. It's bigger than us. But there's all these people who are contending for you. There's all these people that care about you as a community. And so I just love that he is reinforcing that. And Jace, the language is incredible, the way he describes them.
Yeah, and I also think, like, I love where he says at the very end of it, after you've read this letter, pass it on to the church in, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Anna.
Laodicea.
Wow, yes, I am not very good with that language. Latin, I believe that is.
Greek, maybe?
Greek. I've just been silly. But yeah, no, so I think even the way that he says that, and he actually encourages people to share the letters among one another. Right now, we're actually getting a glimpse of his heart for the gospel, and this isn't an exclusive, hey, this is for you and this is for them, but actually we're all a part of the body of Christ. So even in that, we should actually, like you said, we shouldn't just gloss over this stuff, but we should actually go, wow, like Paul's actually invited like people before us to actually share this with one another, and so we get to partake in the sharing of this. And so I really just like that little bit of language there at the end, Anna.
Yeah,
it's cool.
It is really cool. And again, it's challenged me to think about, how do I describe the people who I do ministry with, or how do I describe the people who I go to church with, or whatever it looks like. But the way Paul describes them is so beautiful. He says, just in verse 7, describing the first person, he says, he is a dear brother, a faithful minister, and a fellow servant. Down in verse 9, he says, our faithful and dear brother. The language he uses is so honoring and so encouraging, which just makes me think, like, what a beautiful faith community. Yeah, in verse 12, he says, he is always wrestling in prayer for you, that you may stand firm in all the will of God, mature and fully assured. I just think, like, imagine if we were people that's like wrestled in prayer for people, and that we were so longing to see our friends, our family, people who we go to church with, our small group, if we wrestled in prayer for one another so that we would continue to stand firm in our faith, and that we will be mature and fully assured. in God. I think that's just beautiful.
Yeah. And then I think just finishing off where it says, here is my greeting in my own handwriting. Obviously this is now in whatever font that is. It's not his handwriting. But it says...
Times New Roman?
Times New Roman. Is it actually? Is that what it is? That
I
could be the
reckon.
font, yeah. Let us know if you've got any other different fontage. So it says this, here's my greeting in my own handwriting. Remember my chains and may God's grace be with you. I just think it's like, I don't know, I love the way that he finishes that. Remember my chains. So remember the weights that I'm carrying. Remember how I'm being held down, the burdens in my life, and may God's grace be with you. I think Paul just has such a humility about the way that he writes all of his letters that it's great.
So that is the end of Colossians 4 and the whole end of Colossians letter. We hope that you have enjoyed just slowing down, going week by week, one chapter at a time, and just discussing that with your groups. We'll encourage you to continue doing that now, and just read through that chapter 4 and just see what stands out to you. What do you find challenging? What do you find confusing? Just have some really great discussion around that.
Bye.